Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, October 7th. This is Africa 54.
Hundreds in Burkina Faso, including minors, await trials for terrorism. An activist leads an anti-FGM campaign in Kenya's Somali community. And telemedicine proves its worth during the COVID pandemic.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is firing back at Ethiopia over the government's expulsion of 7 senior UN officials, demanding proof of accusations against them raised by Ethiopia's UN ambassador during Wednesday's Security Council meeting. Ethiopia says it expelled the 7 staffers last week for meddling in its internal affairs. Ethiopia's UN ambassador Taye Askeselassie-Amde is accusing the UN staff of making up data, falsely claiming hunger was used as a weapon of war and that people had died from hunger, and of supporting government foe, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. Guterres says that Ethiopia is on the verge of a major humanitarian event and that the UN's help is needed in the region.
The country is facing an immense humanitarian crisis that demands immediate attention. All efforts should be squarely focused on saving lives and avoiding a massive human tragedy. This makes last Thursday's announcement by the government of Ethiopia to expel 7 senior UN officials, most of them humanitarian staff, particularly disturbing. This unprecedented expulsion should be a matter of deep concern for us all, as it relates to the core of relations between the UN and member states. I urge the government to allow the unrestricted movement of desperately needed fuel, cash, communications equipment, and humanitarian supplies into all the regions in need. And I appeal to all members of the Security Council to do all they can to support these calls and to unify behind the efforts of the United Nations and its partners in Ethiopia.
In his address to the Council, Ethiopian Ambassador Taye Askeselassie-Amde said the expulsions by government came due to the misconduct of the UN staffers.
Expulsion was not our primary course of action. In multiple occasions, we explained our concern to UN officials. On July 8, 2021, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Ethiopia wrote a letter to the UN Secretariat explaining in great details the misconducts of the UN staff that require corrective measures. We also summoned some individuals and warned them to halt their misconduct. Nevertheless, the transgression continued unabated.
Guterres responded with very strong words for the Ethiopian ambassador.
There is any written document provided by the Ethiopian government to any UN institution about any of the 8 members of the UN that were expelled, I would like to receive a copy of that document, because I have not had any knowledge of any of them, and it would be very useful for me to detect if documents are given to the UN and not given to my knowledge. Then I have to investigate what has happened in my organization.
Meanwhile, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said, quote, "There is no justification for the government of Ethiopia's action, none at all." Ambassador Greenfield says the expulsions followed a pattern of escalating obstruction by the government that must be reversed. Greenfield also added in part, quote, "If these calls for humanitarian access continue to go unheard, then the Security Council must act. We should immediately consider all tools at our disposal to facilitate this, including a Security Council resolution to save lives and promote international peace and security." End quote. The African members of the Council, Kenya, Niger, and Tunisia, along with China, urged quiet diplomacy to resolve the rift between Addis Ababa and the United Nations. Now to Burkina Faso, where at least 400 people are awaiting trial on terrorism charges, some for years, including several minors under the age of 16. In this report from Ouagadougou, Henry Wilkins speaks to family members of those living in legal limbo.
Huretu Sidibe says 3 relatives, including her son, are still being held in a maximum security prison in Burkina Faso, 3 years after their arrest. Sidibe, whose name has been changed to protect her identity, says she does not know why they are being held. Since Burkina Faso began its war against armed groups linked to the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda and local bandits 7 years ago, at least 400 citizens have been arrested on suspicion of terrorism-related offences and are being held in custody. Some are children under the age of 16.
It
has been more than a year since I've been able to visit them because I have no means to do it. 2 weeks ago, my brother was able to visit them and gave me some of their news.
The West African country created a penal code for terrorism offences in 2019, but so far only 2 people have been to trial and convicted on terrorism charges. Sidibe says her relatives are being held at a prison in the town of Zenare, which is overcrowded at double its official capacity.
I really need some judicial assistance, a lawyer to follow up their case and free them, because it really is a long time that they've been remanded in prison.
Kumbo Barry, whose name has also been changed to protect her identity, says her son has been held for almost 2 years without trial.
I can't stop crying because I haven't been given any reason for their arrest. I want the government authorities to help me find the reason why my sons were arrested and dropped in that prison. Today I am old and I can't work. I am living with their wives and children. It's difficult to feed them. My husband is old. Everyone is suffering at home because of this situation.
Daouda Diallo is a Burkinabe human rights activist who runs the rights group, the Collective Against Impunity and Stigmatization of Communities, CISC. He says some detainees have been awaiting trial for as long as 5 years.
As a human rights defender, we find that this pretrial detention is excessive. It is an abuse that must be corrected at the level of the law, because we cannot detain someone indefinitely to wait for his or her trial. The fact that justice isn't working can contribute to further violence and worsening vigilantism.
Attending a conference on the processing of terrorism offences Friday, the president of Burkina Faso said the country will continue to prosecute terrorism suspects amidst funding concerns.
We're pleased we've been able to hold the first trial of a terrorist, and I can tell you that I've noted all the concerns and we will ensure that the state can effectively meet these conditions. It is true that we have to take into account the fact that we have financial difficulties, but I think that an effort can be made to reinforce what we already have.
Although the trial and conviction of 2 men is a sign of progress, it remains to be seen how quickly more trials will follow. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso.
The Takuba Task Force is an elite group of European soldiers charged with turning the tide in a decade-long insurgency that has killed thousands of people in the Sahel region. But there are challenges, as Lucy Fielder explains.
Running through the terrain of eastern Mali, a new weapon against jihadist militants. These troops are part of the Takuba Task Force. It's a group of elite soldiers from across Europe tasked with turning the tide on a decade-long insurgency in the Sahel region. On this mission, near the Nigerian border, they're trying to uproot Islamic State-linked militants suspected of killing 50 civilians in the area. Takuba unit leader Captain Artur says they've been at a village for 2 days, carrying out surveillance and doing patrols.
Le but étant de désorganiser au maximum.
The goal is to disorganize as much as possible the enemy's activity, knowing that we are facing 2 major difficulties.
La première, c'est au niveau de la mobilité.
The first one is that we are in the rainy season, so the roads are unusable, and the only roads that are usable are well known to the terrorists, so they can easily follow our movements.
Et la deuxième difficulté,
the second difficulty is that the terrorists have a well-developed network of informants in the region, that are able to inform them on all our activities.
Takuba will help replace Barkhane, France's 5,000-strong counter-terrorism force, which Emmanuel Macron wants to reduce by as much as half. Mali's government has accused France of abandoning its former colony, at a time when violent attacks have been increasing across that country, Niger and Burkina Faso. The insurgency has driven 2 million from their homes and killed thousands of people. Game-changing tactics are sorely needed. Takuba uses smaller, more mobile units with lighter equipment and mostly travels at night. Commanders say it's better suited to the conflict. But challenges remain. On the recent mission, heavy rain trapped vehicles near a village where militants were believed to be hiding. It took 3 hours of revving engines piercing the morning calm to free the truck's tyres. By the time the Takuba troops got to the village, there was no sign of the militants. 2 men were arrested in possession of walkie-talkies, which the soldiers huddled round as they tried to decipher distant voices crackling through the receiver.
Lucy Field of Reuters filed that report. Somalia is accusing Somaliland, a breakaway state not recognized by other nations, of forcibly evicting hundreds of people from a border town as the United Nations Emergency Response Agency warns of a brewing crisis. Fleeing families told the AFP news agency that armed police targeted southern Somali residents in the border town of Lasanod on Sunday, storming their homes, businesses and schools before ordering them to leave all belongings and immediately board trucks out of the city. Somalia's Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble says the operation was unfortunate, but Somaliland's foreign ministry defended the operation, saying the decision to deport a selected number of individuals was motivated by issues pertaining to security, including appeals from the local communities and authorities in Las Anod. Female circumcision, also known as female genital mutilation, is illegal in Kenya, but it is still being forced on young girls in some areas. Cases increased after schools closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but one survivor is fighting the practice in an ethnic Somali community. Brenda Mulinya reports from Garissa, Kenya.
23-year-old Yasmin Mohammed volunteers with Silver Lining Kenya, an organization that champions the rights of young girls and women in Kenya's Garissa County. She is focused on eradicating the illegal and harmful practice of female genital mutilation, or FGM.
As someone who has gone through the act, I know how harmful this is.
She and other activists have joined the government's drive to end cases of female genital mutilation. The number of FGM cases jumped after the coronavirus pandemic forced schools to close, particularly in Somali communities in Garissa.
During COVID, it was a moment of staying together. So that is when parents will realize, oh, these children are growing. So for the ones who are young, there is a need for them to go through the cut. For the ones who are going through puberty is when you see, oh, this one is supposed to be married.
The practice of FGM remains illegal in Kenya, with the government pledging to eradicate it by the end of 2022, 8 years ahead of the global deadline of 2030. Maka Kasim, a community leader involved in rescuing girls from the practice, says it still thrives in places like Garissa because of strong cultural and religious beliefs.
The Somali culturals, they believe if a girl doesn't go through the cut, she is like someone who is not clean. She is an unclean person. They also believe that if the girl doesn't go through the cut, she is not also clean to do the prayers.
The Kenyan government's anti-FGM board is leading the campaign against the harmful practice. The board's CEO, Bernadette Loloju, says keeping schools open is critical to combating the problem, but there are other challenges too.
The only big challenge we have is that girls are getting cut at a younger age when they don't understand what has happened to them. So the communities are really coming up with other new ways of evading the law.
Still, Kenya officials say there are hopeful efforts by the government, and advocates for the girls will keep the country on track to bring the practice to an end. Brenda Molinya for VOA News, Garissa, Kenya.
Victims of sexual abuse by priests in France are calling for historic reform of the Catholic Church after an independent commission found that hundreds of thousands of children had suffered systematic abuse over the past 7 decades. Henry Ridgewell has the details.
Jean-René, Jean-François and Joseph were around 10 years old when the abuse began. Priests at the Chavagnes-en-Paillé Seminary for Minors in Western France engaged in systematic sexual abuse against the children in their charge.
When the idea came to them, they would come and get us. Haven't seen you for a long time, come on. And they would take us to their rooms.
The Catholic Church covered up the abuse.
When someone, a priest, behaved too scandalously in one place, whether in the seminary or in the parish, the bishop would move him to a parish where he would do exactly the same thing he had done before.
For decades, such horrifying stories of abuse and cover-up were repeated across France. The Commission findings, published Monday, revealed that at least 216,000 children, mostly boys, were abused by up to 3,200 priests and other clerics since 1950. When abuse by lay members of the church is included, the number of victims is estimated at 330,000.
Above all, there was a series of neglects, failures, silence, and institutional cover-up, which were systemic in nature.
Pope Francis, Tuesday, offered this response to the Commission findings.
Numeri considerevoli. Desidero esprimere alle vittime la mia tristezza e il mio dolore per I traumi che hanno subito e anche la mia vergogna.
Under French law, many of the offences are too old to prosecute. The Commission called for the Church to increase financial compensation to the victims, payments which are scheduled to begin next year. Some victims say the Catholic Church itself must undergo historic reform.
Aujourd'hui, une réforme de l'Église à vivre.
This involves a process of profound change in the practices, relationships, and governance of the Church.
Earlier this year, Pope Francis changed Catholic laws to explicitly criminalize sexual abuse. Amici Pellis de Rosas heads the group Catholic Voices in France.
I think as long as you have one case left, one predator, one victim left, you need to do more. But Pope Francis, be that as it may, I think has really begun a culture of change.
The French Commission follows similar investigations in several other countries, including the United States and Australia. Pope Francis has described sexual abuse within the Catholic Church as a worldwide catastrophe. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
This year's Nobel Prize in Literature has been awarded to Tanzanian novelist Abdul Razak Gulnar for his body of work detailing the refugee experience and how colonialism shaped African culture. At a news conference at the Swedish Academy's headquarters in Stockholm, Permanent Secretary Mats Malm said Gulnar received the award for his, quote, uncompromising and compassionate penetration of the effects of colonialism and the fate of the refugee in the Gulf between cultures and continents. Gulnar was born in 1948 and raised on the island of Zanzibar. He arrived in England as a refugee in the late 1960s. He will receive a $1.1 million cash prize, but for writers, the prize also adds prestige and publicity by exposing their work to a much wider audience. Happy birthday, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate and veteran of South Africa's struggle against white minority rule is 90 years old on Thursday. He celebrated his birthday with a low-key church service at Cape Town's St. George's Cathedral. Tutu, who was who has struggled with ill health in recent years, is often hailed as South Africa's moral conscience and the great reconciler of a nation divided by decades of racist politics. He served as the country's first black Anglican archbishop. In 1984, Tutu won the Nobel Peace Prize for his non-violent opposition to apartheid. Still to come, a campaign to save Congolese Rumba. We'll tell you all about it after a short break.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
The COVID pandemic is changing how many of us access healthcare. In the U.S. and elsewhere, studies show that virtual medical appointments are effective. They help patients manage their care and keep people out of hospitals. VOA's Carol Pearson has more.
When Loveth Metaboba's baby had diarrhea, she had a video chat with a doctor near her home in Abuja, Nigeria. One effect of the pandemic is that it has radically and quickly changed how healthcare providers care for their patients in rich and poor countries alike. Telemedicine is even being used in 2 remote Himalayan areas of India.
Most of the time of the year, these are cut off from the rest of the world because of the heavy snowfall.
With telemedicine, patients can connect with specialists in outpatient departments or OPDs and even emergency departments at hospitals in major cities.
We have been able to cater to about 3,000 consultations in OPD consultations, and more than 60 tele-emergencies have been stabilized at these 2 locations.
In the U.S., telemedicine appointments reduced the risk of further illness for some children by 99%, according to a study by the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. The study showed that telemedicine prevented at-risk children from being exposed to COVID-19 and other viruses they might encounter outside their homes. In rural parts of the U.S., people with opioid addictions are often underserved. There are not enough clinics or treatment centers. A University of Maryland study shows telemedicine was as effective as meeting in person at a treatment clinic. Telemedicine has also provided clinicians with insight they didn't have before the pandemic, especially in treating U.S. troops with mental health issues.
One of the benefits I think we've learned and the pandemic has really reinforced is that virtual care or telehealth is an excellent way to engage individuals. And from a rehabilitation perspective, it's so important for providers to be able to see how someone functions in their home or in their community rather than in the clinic or in the hospital.
Additionally, telemedicine has proven to get more men to see a doctor. A survey by Cleveland Clinic showed that men are more comfortable with virtual visits than with face-to-face appointments.
Many of the issues that men develop with age are intimate in nature and might pertain to sexual or urinary dysfunction. So I think that the virtual visit allows them to feel like it's a little bit more of a private conversation.
Virtual visits can stop serious conditions from becoming deadly.
Erectile dysfunction can actually be the first sign of cardiovascular disease. Urinary issues can sometimes be the first sign of diabetes or sleep apnea. So even some of these men's health issues that may be more quality of life related, get them checked out. We can often help you get back to normal function and also make sure that there's not anything more serious going on.
With telemedicine, patients don't have to take as much time off work. It reduces or eliminates the cost of travel, which can be expensive, especially in developing countries where people often travel long distances to a clinic or hospital. Telemedicine helps people see doctors they might not normally have had access to. And finally, telemedicine could improve health worldwide and reduce poverty by saving time and reducing medical costs. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
The Democratic Republic of Congo and the Republic of Congo are campaigning to protect Congolese rumba, a music steeped in historic anti-colonial significance. Here's David Doyle.
At an open-air club in Kinshasa, dancers sway to the rumba rhythms of Manu Chante and his band Bana OK. It's music like this, alive with historic anti-colonial significance, that a campaign from Democratic Republic of Congo and neighbouring Republic of Congo is seeking to protect. They've submitted for Congolese rumba to be included on UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage. Part of Chante's set is Independence Cha-Cha, a hit by Congolese icon Le Grand Calais. It debuted during negotiations for Congo's liberation from Belgium in 1960, electrifying delegates. Chante holds a particular reverence for the song, and indeed the whole rumba genre.
It existed for more than 50 years. I've lived my whole life with the rumba. If you look at the rumba now, we've elevated and developed it. Although we've kept our references to the icons Le Grand Calais, Papa Wemba, Simara Masia, Taboulé.
61 years after Congo gained independence, and rumba remains at the core of music across the continent. If the UNESCO submission is successful, Congolese rumba would join, among others, the street hawker food of Singapore, sauna culture in Finland, and the traditional irrigation systems of the United Arab Emirates. The list helps demonstrate the diversity of cultural heritage and raises awareness about its importance. Catherine Katunga-Furah is DRC's Minister of Art and Culture.
Rumba is us. Rumba is our life. Rumba is our vision. So rumba is us. That's why we want the rumba to be recognized as our own. It is our identity. Rumba is Congolese.
Born in the melting pot of 19th century Cuba, rumba combined the drumming of enslaved Africans with the melodies of Spanish colonizers. It was re-exported back to Africa in the early 20th century. According to the two Congos UNESCO submission, the name derives from Nkumba, a naval dance in the ancient kingdom of Congo, and literally means belly button. UNESCO's decision will be announced in November.
That report was filed by David Doyle of Reuters. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.